We are live, YouTube, everybody. We are live. So Friday live Q&A. Three questions have come in today, and I'm gonna keep doing this every Friday. I think it's great. Let's keep the questions coming, especially as we're going through the month of October right now. And if you're listening on Instagram, I hope you can hear me this time. Last week, a little technical difficulties to start the day. Okay, let's jump right into it. Three questions. First question, better to buy at a high rate or wait until rate drops? Yeah, great question. I think this is kind of on the mind of a lot of people right now, a lot of buyers especially. I would say there's different factors go into the decision of purchasing a property. And the first one is, what exactly are you looking for in your personal decision making when it comes to purchasing a property? So if you've been waiting for maybe prices to drop, or you've been kind of just watching and seeing what's going on in a market, for example, like Toronto, we've seen prices in the last year or so, 2022, for example, prices shot up really quick at the start, and interest rates were ultra low at that time. So then as rates started to go up, we saw prices started to pull back. And now that's kind of where we're at right now, is that rates are much higher than they were even a year ago today, a year and a half ago especially. And now that rates are up and prices have pulled back a little bit, one thing to factor in is that there's a lot more properties on the market right now. For example, if you're looking for a condo right now, basically there's give or take just over about 1,100 condos in the city of Toronto downtown in CO1 and CO8, which is the main core of the city. And in that sense, there's definitely different options here when it comes to properties. And if you're looking for a condo right now in the city, and you want to maybe negotiate on something or take your time and go look at multiple properties at the same time, that's something you can do right now, versus last year when rates were ultra low. It was much more competitive in the market on basically everything out there because there just wasn't that much available. So I know it's a long answer, but one thing I will say is typically when rates are higher, prices are lower. And then when rates go lower, typically prices go higher. So if you're more interested in getting a lower purchase price, then buying in a higher interest rate environment could be the option for you in that sense. But if you're worried more about the interest rate, then purchasing in a lower rate environment obviously is better. But I don't necessarily think we're going to get to that low of an interest rate as we move forward. I think that we're going to remain pretty high for the next foreseeable future. And I would imagine, I'm not an economist or anything, but I would imagine that they're not exactly going to drop the rates super low right away after what we just went through. I think they're going to wait. Maybe we might see like maybe a 0.25% drop here and there as we move along, but I don't think they're just going to drop back down to, we were as low as like 2% back in during everyone knows what went on at that time. So anyway, at that point, basically, I do think if you're interested in the price, obviously you can negotiate on the price right now when more properties are on the market, which is great. And then over time, hopefully the rates will come down, and then you can negotiate on the rate in the future. One thing that you can't change over time when you own the property is the original purchase price, whereas the rate could fluctuate back and forth as you move along in home ownership. Next question, does my property need staging? Short answer, yes. I would say every property needs an element of staging. Now, if you're one of those people with incredibly amazing looking furniture and everything's well laid out and well staged, and basically you live in a staged property, then maybe you don't need it as much, or if the property shows well as it is. But I would say at the very least on the listing side, I do think it's super important to at least have the conversation with a stager. At least they can come in and maybe give some pointers or tips on maybe different elements that could help in selling the property, because the stagers always think of it in perspective of what's the best layout imaginable for the property, and how would they change things if needed to appeal to the most amount of buyers and to appeal to more buyers that will obviously hopefully want to purchase the property. So I do think staging is super important, especially 1,000,000% if the property is vacant and there's no furniture in there. If you were just on my Instagram today, I posted we destaged the property because it had sold. So seeing what it looks like now without the furniture is totally different than when the furniture was in there, and you can actually visualize where the couch goes, where the TV goes, where the bed goes, all that stuff. So staging super important, and on top of staging, it will make your property photograph way better. It'll look way better in photos. And then virtual staging, I think, is a good element if you're using like pictures for a lease, for example, but I still think on a purchase side, it's worth the investment. As a realtor, it's something I think is important as a realtor to invest in for my clients, is getting that staging in there, because ultimately the property will show better and typically perform better on the market. I believe the stats, last I checked, were 3 to 6% higher purchase price in a stage property. Last question: would you buy a rental property right now? If so, what type and where? Oh yeah, that's a great question. It really depends. I think that first of all, it depends on what your current situation is on your current property, and where your ownership, like where your interest rate is for your own property, and if you're up for renewal and what that new payment will look like. That's a big consideration. I typically own rental properties, so I believe in real estate. I do think long term, owning a piece of property in a great location, a great area. I think if you look at a rental property, it's really important to look at it from a long term perspective. So what are you going to do with that property in 10 years or something down the road? Not exactly in the short term. Typically in Toronto, the average price goes up about 6.8% a year over time. And then if a tenant's able to pay that down, and rents right now are at the highest they've ever been, that could work great. That being said, properties are not exactly cash flowing anywhere right now. And I don't even think they're cash flowing in a city like, definitely not anywhere in the Greater Toronto area, that's for sure. So I think that if you're only looking for cash flow, then you'll be looking in markets where those properties might not see the highest type of appreciation relative to the rest of the market. Whereas in a city like Toronto, you may be negative cash flow, but hopefully over time, buying in a great location in the city will enable that to develop some equity over time to kind of make up for that loss in cash flow. Basically, that's kind of something that's really important around the city, is to look at properties and what is the upside in that property over time and where can it go. The last part of that question, what type and where, it really depends on what kind of investor you are. If you're an investor who wants to be, I wouldn't say hands off, because that's never, owning a rental property is never hands off. But if you're an investor who's looking for something that you only really need to call a plumber or electrician or something like that, then maybe a condo is for you. They're typically pretty hands off because there's no roof to take care of, there's no basement to take care of. Everything is pretty contained within the unit. If you're looking for a bigger return, but also a bigger investment on the initial purchase price, then a house obviously is a great option. If you can rent 2 levels of the house, maybe it's a duplex in the city of Toronto, good upside there, but also you'll get pretty high rent as well. That could be an option if it's affordable. Condos downtown Toronto, great location, are typically the entry point when it comes to purchasing a rental property. And then if you're looking at other markets, I do like the city of Hamilton, because a lot of those houses, those wartime bungalows, are typically have like a separate entrance to the basement. So if you're able to renovate the property into like upper level and lower level, you can get 2 incomes in there, and the rents in Hamilton are actually quite good, pretty close to where they're at in Toronto. And you could purchase one of those bungalows in Toronto for in Hamilton for a similar price than a condo in Toronto. So hope that answered the question. Hope everybody has a great Friday. It's a rainy day in Toronto, but still a great day. Enjoy your Friday, and we're edging closer to winter. It's getting cold. We're feeling it. Enjoy the day.